It was about just over 10 years ago. I wrote a paper, and it was outlining very much the changes in the region. Particularly, this was the time of the great Sunni movements, the power projects, the Salafist project, the Muslim Brotherhood project, the Jihadi project. And it was at the time of what was called the Arab Awakening, misnamed by the West, but it was at the time of this. And these were the dominant sort of, if you like, power projects in the region at that time. And I was going back to that old paper for something I was writing, and I thought, how much the region has changed. It's 180 degrees different now. Where are all those projects? Well, briefly, they're not what they were. They've either collapsed completely or they've been much muted. And instead, we have a very different scenario. We have a very different scenario overall, because a number of things happened in those 10 years. But first, I want to go back to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which is the main purpose, I think, of this talk. And in fact, in a way, I think I saw this coming conflict. I wrote about that 10 years ago, and I said then, I predicted we would see a conflict between religious poles taking place, between, if you like, the symbols of Islam, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the symbols of Judaism, Temple Mount, taking place in the future. And of course, I was a bit late in the day in the sense, because you mentioned that I was a member of Senator Mitchell's fact-finding committee into the Second Intifada, which is true. And recall what happened, what started it. First of all, Sharon provocatively went on to Haram al-Sharif, deliberately, and it was, it was not so widely seen because what it did was trigger the Second Intifada, but in fact, the more important element of it was he was deliberately stirring religious nationalism. This was a project to raise up and to stimulate Israeli religious nationalism. And at the same time, it was to stimulate something called the Temple Mount movement. Temple Mount movement could have filled a minibus at that time. It was tiny. Now it has 3 posts in the cabinet. Complete transformation that took place. Anyway, I was contemplating this because, first of all, what happened in Israel just over a year ago, I don't think people really comprehend the radical change that took place then and what it portends for the future. What happened, it was astonishing for me and my wife, who knew the region quite well. I lived between Palestine and Israel for 9 years when I was doing the work for the European Union, the ceasefires, or attempted to get ceasefires and so on. What happened at the election, we said, look, what's coming out of the Prime Minister's office are the Mizrahi. These are the Jews of North Africa and the Middle East. And they had overturned the long-standing dominance of the Ashkenazi, the liberal European Jews, who had dominated the defense and the politics for so long. So we had a Mizrahi. Just to be clear, the Mizrahi in Israel have always been the underdogs. These are the people that probably, you could say, did the dirty work in Israel. And the Ashkenazi were the liberal, prosperous businessmen, elites, and they'd been pushed out of government. And the Mizrahi not only took power, but they took power with a radical agenda. And listen to it. The first agenda was to establish Israel on the land of Israel. Just to be clear, establishing Israel on the land of Israel, how it's defined, no Palestine. end of Palestine. That's what that means. It was the end of Palestine altogether. Second point in these government agenda, the second point in the government agenda was to rebuild the Third Temple. Well, just to be clear again, if you're not familiar with the geography, rebuilding the Third Temple means knocking down Al-Aqsa, the symbol of Islam. Okay? And the third element, which is why you've had such an uproar in Israel, particularly amongst the sort of urban cosmopolitan elites of Herzliya and Tel Aviv, was the establishment of halakhic law. That's religious Judaic law, which of course is not very compatible with the way secular Israelis were living. So it cleared up a great fuss, but they took power during this time, and they pursued the agenda. And of course, when you look at what happened on 7th of October, I mean, the Palestinians could understand very clearly what that agenda meant. Firstly, no Palestine. Secondly, the destruction of a key Islamic symbol. And thirdly, moving to something quite contradictory for them to contemplate was halakhic Judaic law in this. And just before, on the Friday before the 7th of October, the settlers stormed Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif. And I think this played a very important part in what happened on the 7th of October. But what I want to move on to is to say that during those 10 years, since I wrote that piece in 2012, and certainly since I was there during that period as the representative of the EU, Israel has moved very far to the right. I mean, essentially, first of all, in sort of, if you like, secular right terms, that would be correct. It had moved there before the events of this last period, moved very far to the right. Then in came this radical government, and that moved Israel even further to the right. But it also opened up what was always latent and present in Israel. But it opened up for the first time the eschatological dimension. And we heard, if you like, Netanyahu and the Prime Minister talking about Amalek, which, for those of you who may not be familiar, Amalek was mentioned in Samuel book as a tribe that existed, and that the Jews were instructed by God to kill them all, everyone, male, female, children, animals, everyone was to be eliminated by order, by divine order. And these were the languages that were being used during 7th of October. So it was becoming an eschatological project in a sense. Now, just to be clear, in a way, Hamas and the resistance have been, this was not something that just came out of the blue. This had been long prepared and reflected a completely different, if you like, reflected a completely different approach to war and to resistance. And it does have some elements. It's not entirely that, of course, at all. But there is, if you like, some form of eschatological direction in it, because it's about recuperating, if you like, the whole civilization of Islam, the 1,000 years of Islam, its contributions to science, to medicine, its huge civilizational project. So we had, unlike when I first mentioned it 10 years ago, we have the poles of the, if you like, a renaissance of the Islamic civilization. when I call it an Islamic civilization, I'm emphasizing that because it was no longer. I remember talking to the founder of Hamas, Sheikh Yassin, at the beginning, and he was quite surprising because he said to me, first of all, this is not an ideological project. This is not, Hamas is not, the Muslim Brotherhood. You can be anyone and join it. You can be Christian, you can be Druze, even I. Would you like to join it? And so it was a very different, if you like, project. It was a liberation project. And then it has been focused on Al-Aqsa as a symbol of a storied Islamic history, not just the building itself. And so this has been, if you like, a huge change. And you see on the ground that Islam is having a new effect. If you look at the videos coming out after the 7th of October, people welcoming the hostages that are coming in, you see it's an Islamic, very much Islamic, but also nationalist. I mean, in the sense of a liberation movement. It's about removing the long period of colonialism, of imperial suppression, repression. So you've got, for the first time since I think about 58, you have Islam, if you like, the nationalist element and the Islamic element finding a common cause in something new, which is, if you like, a new form of liberation and a new form which is not Wahhabi, which is not Muslim Brotherhood, which is not Salafist, which is neither Shi'i nor Sunni. And that's a really, if this continues, it is going to have a huge impact, I believe, in the region. Anyway, I want to turn now to the second part of these sort of introductory points that I made, which was, of course, during that period. And I used to speak with Arafat every 10 days or so, a week or 10 days. I mean, he told me from the beginning that the peace process obviously was clearly never meant to succeed. And my experience endorses that. I was there, I saw none of the preparations for moving to, two states taking place, rather the reverse. And I won't go into it now, but I mean, I was very much involved with the peace process of the Oslo process. The Oslo process was really a process for undermining a Palestinian state ever coming into being, just to be frank about it. I can explain it later if you want more detail. But it wasn't about this. It gave every room for Israel to maneuver, to delay it, put it off, and not ever arrive at the outcome of that process. Yet now we have a crisis after 7th of October taking place. And what is the Western policy and what is the US policy on this? Well, it's to go back to the idea of a two-state solution. But do they not understand that the whole project of settlement, of, if you like, settlement colonialism that received such a boost in 73 after the 73 war, when Israel gave back the Sinai to Egypt, and the settler movement really took a sharp upturn from then, because never again are we going to give up territory. Never again are we going to concede territory. And so the settler movement was conceived by Ariel Sharon precisely to make sure there was never a Palestinian state. And of course, it's impossible to have a two-state solution. Just to be absolutely clear, it will never occur, a two-state solution. One of the things that Sharon did for me, if you like, very strangely, with his sort of top aide, Rafik Gitan, was send me around the settlements, the radical settlements, the hardline settlements. And I was there as the Prime Minister's guest, and they said, you can speak freely to this man. Tell him what you think. Wow, God, what a shock. These people are crazy. They are absolutely fanatics. They hate Palestinians. They are prepared to shed blood for their position. It was astonishing. When I got back, I was asked by Rafi, he said, "Do you understand why we sent you?" And I said, "Yeah, I understand it now. No one, not the IDF, no one is going to remove the 700, what are now 800,000 settlers. It will be a bloodbath. And in any case, the army that's in the West Bank now is mostly composed of settlers anyway, so it's never going to happen. So we're not going to have a two-state solution. Of course not. And furthermore, the Israelis don't want any Palestinian state. They want to establish Israel on the land of Israel, which means basically from the Litani River down to the Sinai, from the river to the sea. And this is what we are dealing with at the moment, an eschatological project on the part of, if you like, on the part of Israel, and a very sophisticated, well-planned maneuver by the resistance. The resistance fronts, the united fronts, which are not just Hamas, but Hezbollah, of course, and Ansar, the Houthis, and the Hashad in Iraq, and of course others. So what do we get? The United States and the EU say, oh, the solution to this is, first of all, there must be a ceasefire out of Gaza. Okay, but having done, if you like, hostage negotiations, both with Hamas for Gilad Shalit and with Hezbollah for members of the IDF, I can just say to you that the Americans have no idea how to do hostage negotiation. They have completely are acting as, if you like, the advocate of Israel in those negotiations. Hamas have not changed their original demands, as I would expect. And I don't think they are likely to in this near time. So we will see the IDF going into Gaza, into Rafah, into the city. That's, I think, almost inevitable. When it happens, I don't know that it'll happen just now because the Israeli army is rather sort of tired and needing some sort of rest. And actually, most of their forces, 4 divisions, are now sitting on the border with Lebanon. And for sure, Lebanon is going to be at some point attacked by Israel because they have so many displaced Israelis sitting in hotels by the Dead Sea. Nearly, we don't know exactly how many, but altogether it's well over 1 million Israelis, and they're getting very, very fed up, and they are putting a lot of political pressure on the government to do something, to push Hezbollah back across the Litani River and to disarm them. And that's going to happen at some point. So my point here is we're at a point of inflection where the situation between Israel and Palestine might get very much worse. And the West has only the tools of 25 years ago, just to be absolutely frank, that failed then as their solution to the proposal. And tools which are totally out of sync with the feelings, the majority, overwhelming majority, of the new Israel. Very different from what Biden knew years ago, the nice friendly kibbutzes and the kibbutzniks, liberal Europeans in the kibbutz, like Borrell, the head of the European Union foreign policy, worked in a kibbutz and he met his wife in a kibbutz. Very different from Ben Gvir, from Smotrich, from Levin. This is a different world away. So they are proposing, first of all, that there has to be a ceasefire. The ceasefire will unlock some sort of transitory, temporary Palestinian state that doesn't control its borders, which is effectively a Bantustan engulfed by Israeli militarism from the river to the sea. And they're saying, and of course then Saudi Arabia will play its part and will recognize Israel, and Israel will be integrated into the Arab world. And as the last speaker pointed out, it's not going to happen. Saudi Arabia is going to stick with the Arab Accords of 2002 and not going to move beyond that. And also, the Arab world has been radicalized by what's happened. The whole Islamic world has been radicalized by what happened and is continuing to happen in Gaza every day. The horrors that are taking place, the starvation, the deliberate genocide that is taking place in Gaza is changing the region and changing, if you like, the fundamentals for those Arab states. Egypt, Jordan, both quite vulnerable. Saudi Arabia, of course, has things under tight control, but we do not see. So I don't want to go on. I just stop there and will say, what I'm saying is we're coming to an inflection point where things are about to get a lot worse, in my view, because it cannot be very long before Israel will take measures. I can see them on the ground already. They're moving up engineering forces. They have 4 divisions on the border. It's clearly being prepared, an incursion into Lebanon, and therefore a conflict with Hezbollah, which will be quite different from the one with Hamas. We're at this point of inflection, and the West has no idea how to deal with it, except dealing with it in the old secular concepts by which, if you like, long ago, the conflict between Israel and Palestine was always thought to be managed and understood in terms of secular concepts of statehood and division of power and territory. And I'm just saying, this is gone, it's over, it's going to be very uncertain what will be the outcome from what comes next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crook, for such a very good, informative, with lots of evidence, informations. And let's emphasize once more again that everybody in this room is talking on his personal capacity, not official views, and by saying that I would like to go for the second round and make this discussion look like more a dialogue, more an expert dialogue, more interactively, and give the floor again for the second round to Dr. Sultani. Doctor, you raised a very good point of based on your very in-depth experience in international organizations like United Nations, other offices in Geneva, and in international organizations in Vienna. I would like now you have the floor to elaborate more, comments on other panelists' view, and maybe if you'd like, you can point out the role of the Iran in this crisis. And we are all ears to learn much more from you. Please go ahead.
Well, I have to confess that I've been very impressed by excellent, eloquent, informative talks by the panelists. I really commend the organizers and also the panelists. Perhaps a simple question to distinguished last speaker, Mr. Koch. What do you think about the possibility of another alternative, namely one-state solution? This has been raised, of course, by Iran for almost 2 decades or more. In fact, I'm sure everybody knows, it means that to have in fact, democratic referendum under the auspices of the United Nations, with all participation of Jews, Christian, Muslims, and Palestinians having equal vote. Then this might be. In fact, Mr. Marwan from Palestinian Authority has a sort of a national initiative in the same token, in the same direction. I'm sure you have followed it. Anyway, when twisted solution, as you said, and it seems the case that is not possible, then what other options? The other option is one-state solution. Of course, this twisted solution had inherited deficiency and also problem because, in fact, de facto considered or recognized the issue of a Jewish state, namely the Zionist continuity and the settlements. It means nothing will be changed. The Jewish state need more land for Jews of the whole world to be there, and the same tragedy will continue as long as that mindset is not changed. But however, as you said, realistically, with your eloquent, vast experience that you had, twisted solution would not be possible. Then how about the one-state solution?
Of course. When I said there would be a no two-state solution for Palestinians, that did not mean there would be no Palestinian state. I didn't imply that, or I left it unsaid, should we say. We are at a crucial point, and I think the other thing to underline that has happened, the 7th October broke the paradigm of Zionism, completely smashed the paradigm of Zionism. Zionism has had two really aspects to it, modern Zionism. One was that all Jews living in Israel per se should be able to live securely wherever they choose and know that the IDF and the government had their back. That means would take care of their security and would come to defend them. All of that was exploded on the 7th of October. The second point, and this is the one that is really gripping the Israeli electorate, it does help if you don't just read Haaretz and the liberal papers that are tied to the West, but the majority, 2/3 of the Israelis are concerned about the end of Zionism, an existential fear that they have, because they say after 7th of October, we are not feared as we should be any longer. They don't fear us now. They've seen what a mess the army made in the wake of 7/11, the disorder in the government. They see all that, and Zionism cannot exist if the states around it don't fear it. And so what do we get from this is we get the demand, which is one that is reflected by Netanyahu and the cabinet. We must have a big victory that is going to reassert the paradigm of Zionist overwhelming force if it's challenged and restore fear about it. Well, they've chosen, the only one that they've chosen to be if you like, to do this job would be an overwhelming war, an overwhelming victory, not on Hamas, which it doesn't look as if it's going to come, certainly not now, but not at all, perhaps, but with Hezbollah. And in this sense, this is why I don't think the United States understand the landscape and don't understand. I know Hezbollah quite well. I mean, they are a really effective, probably the third strongest military force in the region. They have 150,000 smart missiles, cruise missiles that cover the whole of Israel. And they have the Radwan force. And I've met them, I know them. They're very, very efficient soldiers, not in the Western way, in a different way. And so I don't think that either Israel or America understand what war with Hezbollah would involve, because it could be existential. but they have a hubristic view. And I've heard, you know, the practitioners of real politics in the West say, come on, how can that happen? You know, I mean, you know, what's Hamas? It's 30,000 troops underground, and Hezbollah. And Israel is a state with the resources of a state, and it has this massive army. Of course, it's not an existential risk. This is, first of all, just the conventional thing going back to the Second World War about firepower and air superiority. Of course, that's what it really is. So they don't look at the dangers that confronting with them that. And I have to say that one of the things that's been quite striking is the way that Iran and the resistance together have been trying to manage the conflict so that it doesn't end up in massive damage in a regional war. So they use things to, they try and control the escalatory ladder up this conflict. And they changed the intensity. So they have intensity control so that they can raise the flames, lower the flames, move the flames to Yemen, move them back to Lebanon, whatever. And also the aim more than that is to very carefully escalate up the ladder according to Israeli mistakes. In other words, you know, no Pavlovian dog reaction. When Hezbollah is provoked by an assassination or something, you're not allowed, the resistance side doesn't allow a Pavlovian reaction of smashing back at Israel and playing into the, if you like, strategy of Israel. It's very carefully controlled. Is it going to be enough? Well, no one knows the answer to that, but it's certainly been very carefully thought out, very carefully agreed between the resistance elements and the parties to this conflict. And it relies on, if you like, also that the perpetrator of the next stage, which might be a war in Lebanon, will be Israel, not Hezbollah. That is the underlying. Apart from that, consensus between the fronts, consensus and an understanding that they don't have, the strategic element has to be by consensus, but tactical effects are their judgment.
Great. Of course, I have other questions, but I think I should not waste time. I'm curious to other things. But of course, regarding my own experience, I'm very much disappointed. After 41 or 2 years working with the United Nations, I never thought this much inability and lack of utility to touch upon this crisis, paralyzed UN or so, is very disappointing. But it's still, as I said, in our institute, we tried to have a gleam of hope to do something. That is what we propose with this environment, which will help the General Assembly to have as many as vote as possible for full membership of Palestine. That full membership, at least politically and strategically, give a new status to Palestinians, which could be perhaps pave the way for any sort of talks or negotiation for the future of Palestine. That is what we've said, and also the UNRWA. I would be appreciated to have your viewpoints, how feasible and practical this will be, of course, because we will take into due consideration in our institute for our next deliberation. Thank you.
I'm probably going to disappoint you, because I don't think that a simple declaration that the Palestinians who are not in control of their territory, who do not control their land, technically do not qualify to be considered a state and therefore to have membership of the United Nations. It's true that the General Assembly could pass some sort of resolution, But I'm not sure that this would actually help, because what you'd be endorsing would be the PLO. And the PLO, in my view, after all these years, is dominated by the old guard of Fatah. I know them well. I mean, that was why I was dealing with Hamas in the first place, in order to try and find if it was at all possible for the Fatah elements to be able to work to a political agenda. And the answer, I think, is probably no. And I think until this generation of Fatah is gone, if you talk to the younger Fatah members, it's totally different. You can barely distinguish them from Hamas. And I think there will be a huge shift when that happens. But I don't think to sort of promote, I really dread the sight of, if it happened, of sort of Abu Mazen ambling onto the stage in the UN to declare a state. He's detested by 93% of Palestinians who just want him gone. And I can't imagine him appearing on the on a stage. He's always tried to present himself in this way. And it's not been, I don't think, very satisfactory for the Palestinians. I think what it might do, the only good thing that might come out of it, it might, accelerate his demise as the chair of the Palestinian Authority.
I apologize, the organizer and the others. Let me just explain to you. The proposal for full-fledged membership, it doesn't depend on who is running that place. The group of member states, could propose in General Assembly, and based on the historical background, which is so-called the mechanism of uniting for peace, which has happened before, then Palestine will be full member, as it is observatory state. And I was involved when they become observatory state in Vienna, CTBT, and others, and recently or IAA. But we want to go one step as member, full member. When they are a full member, then they would have a different status in the decision making and many other process. It is not as if that after the all member states talk and then give to observatory states to give a talk. Anyway, that status will give them a sort of a legitimacy. It is shameful after decades. UK just recently said we'll recognize Palestine. You see, therefore that is one step that I think that might help. But of course, it has to be pursued. And the reason that 153 members of the General Assembly voted the last resolution, of course, I said that is non-legally binding, but it shows that because of this unfortunate tragedy, the environment is useful and conducive and possible that we have to use now. It is better than tomorrow. These kind of gestures to establish this statehood. Anyway, I stop here, and of course, I would be appreciated if there is any comment or challenge what I said in my statement. Thank you.
I would like to just say that I think it would be very divisive within the Palestinian polity. Mainly because there have been no elections in Palestine since, I think, 1953 or something like this. And I imagine that there would be a very strong sense that, if such thing was taken forward, it would be time to have elections and time to completely renew the leadership in Palestine. And so that might introduce a lot of internal tensions within the Palestinians. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Just because Dr. Matviv raised his hand for a long time, I would like to give the floor for his remarks and actually express my curiosity about, at the end of the day, yesterday we had the chance to host Fyodor. You may know him very well, and Fyodor said it's obvious that the first issue of the Russia is now the Ukraine, and at the end of the day, the Russia is not intentionally, but it's benefiting from this. Another issue that the West is dealing with. What's your opinion? What's your remarks? Any question? Any comments? Be as much as possible, frankly and clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this question, because it is interconnected with my comment. Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's not only about Ukraine. Ukraine is in the air, but Russia has been paying much attention towards other issues, especially taking into consideration the growing interconnections between different conflicts. And I will just give you one example: the recent hosting of inter-Palestinian consultations in Moscow by the Russian expert community, but by the Russian leading expert community. So that's very important. As for the previous remarks and questions, again, I would like to emphasize that the war in Gaza has been demonstrating not only the failure of the old paradigm of Zionism, but also the joint paradigm, American-Israeli paradigm, that money comes first. So the idea was to pacify the Middle East using the money, the projects, logistics, etc. I will not go in details, but actually also integrating Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, and before that the Abraham Accords, and etc. So it was nice viewed in the West and by certain Arab elites, and it was nice looking, but they forgot about the inner differences inside the Palestinian community and between the generations in the Palestinian community. So that's very important. And all of a sudden, Hamas appeared on the scene, and that led to the failure of American diplomacy in this direction, but not complete failure. On the other hand, Hamas saw, and the Palestinians saw, that very reluctant position of the Arab world, very pro-Palestinian rhetorics, but at the same reluctance based on the imperative of sustainable development across all regions, especially in the Gulf. So it's not Cold War times, when the logic was very simple: to support the West or the US, or to support the Soviet Union, and to bring sacrifices and etc. for the sake of these bipolar world and confrontation between the Soviet Union and the US. It's not so simple anymore. And the Palestinians can afford, like the Israelis can afford, all this. I think that there will be an outcome, there will be a way forward. From the Israeli side, it will take time, because now the community is pretty much radicalized. Well, it's a common tendency during any war conflict in any society, consolidation of the society, and etc. But we can remember the words of Yitzhak Rabin, who was saying that, well, five-star hotels play the similar role as divisions. So that's another story, but it will take time. I think under US pressure, under the Western pressure, there will be certain evolution of Israeli position, but it will take time. It will take time, definitely not a year, I think. On the Palestinian side, the same story. So definitely there are certain militants, military wing of Hamas, who were hardliners and etc. But political wing of Hamas being hosted in Doha, and partly technocratic military wing. Well, they think about the reconstructions with their aid and etc., and they understand this imperative of sustainable development. They will not be complete isolation anymore. So I think there should be some ground emerging with time, not just in a year, for a golden compromise. And I think it was reflected by the inter-Palestinian consultations in Moscow recently, because it was a clear sign of growing understanding among the Palestinians for that. So money is not enough. Without Palestinian state is not enough. But we have an example. This is my point of view as an expert of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I've been to Bosnia and Herzegovina, so it seemed absolutely not possible since the very beginning during the wartime. There were atrocities, there were war crimes, there were massive casualties, and etc. There was a very sharp confrontation with the West, Western intervention in Serbia, attacking Serbia, peaceful people, and etc. But for the time being, they managed to create some entity. So why? Because they were mainstream imperative of the European Union, even for Serbia. So that's a very interesting point. But I think that realpolitik is always very important, and we should not underestimate realpolitik and overestimate the emotions, even not by regular people, by the Arab state, by the Palestinian state, but all over the world. So I think there will be a way forward for a golden compromise, but not at once. It will take time. Thanks.
Many thanks, many thanks. Now have the time to go to again to Beijing. Professor Liang Jiang, I would like to raise another question. You touched it at the first round about the U.S. election and the impact of this election on this crisis and war. And yesterday we had the chance to host other Chinese colleagues, and nowadays is the annual. It has been a year past from the Iran and Saudi Arabia deal, and I would like to ask you to elaborate more on the impact of this deal and the connection of this deal to the new regional order, or as Dr. Sultaniye phrased it, it's not at all any order, world without order. Please go ahead. We are all ears to hear your remarks, comments, questions. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think that reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia is very important for regional order. I think it's actually no, before October the 7th. Yeah, I think or in the last decades we have seen a very fierce competition, strategic competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Lebanon, Iraq, Bahrain, and Yemen. Okay, but because of the reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, we have seen this kind of competition has stopped. So it is it serves to maintain the stability in the region. I think the relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia is one of the defining factor in regional order. So it serves to maintain the stability. I think because of that, Iran sees the chances to improve its domestic economic situation. And Iran is also seeing a lot of economic relations between China and Iran. And the last year, according to statistics by the Iranian side, the trade volume between Iran and China has risen to be 27 billion US dollars. I think, and China imports about 1 million barrel of oil from Iran. And for Saudi Arabia, it is also serves to to its economic development. Without the reconciliation, Saudi Arabia cannot start its domestic agenda to diversify its economy, to implement its agenda of 2030 vision, and cannot implement the projects of the new city, something like all these kind of projects. So that is what we see before October 7th. After October 7th, we have seen the worsening trend of the security situation in the Middle East because of the spillovers of the Palestine-Israel conflict in the Red Sea, in Iraq, and in other parts of the Middle East. But I think the reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia did serve to maintain modest stability in the region. I would like to say that it is very important, okay? But I also think that it will serve to contribute to the work for the legitimate cause of the Palestinians. But unfortunately, Saudi Arabia is not contributing enough to that cause. But nowadays, we still see a lot of challenges ahead. One of the challenges is the role of the United States. The United States might provoke some divisions between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and to try to increase the tensions, to create dissatisfactions. But also, I would like to say that the Iranians and the Saudi Arabians have not fully recognized the significance of the reconciliation, particularly on the Saudi side. Iranians have a lot of complaints about that. Certainly, yeah, we need some time to fully materialize the benefits of the reconciliation. But on the Iranian side, but the Iranian side has a lot of complaints. But on the Saudi side, they have even more complaints. But I think their complaints are not necessary and not reasonable. They would complain that though the reconciliation is there, Iran's policy has not changed. But I told them that you cannot expect that much. But anyway, the reconciliation benefited Saudi Arabia greatly. And I also send my personal message to Saudi and the UAE scholars and colleagues that we have to keep a low profile and stop complaining. Otherwise, it will be made use by the United States. It might be taken advantage by the United States. But to follow up, to consolidate that process, I think that firstly, President Raisi already visited Saudi Arabia. But this time, I think to make the reconciliation sustainable, we should work to make a reciprocal visit from Saudi Arabia, to make this kind of reconciliation, keep the temperature of the reconciliation. And also, I think the direct strategic dialogue, a security dialogue between Iran and Saudi Arabia is very important. I would suggest that Iran and Saudi Arabia can have a very high-profile strategic and security dialogue. It is a good news that your military chief telephoned Saudi's defense minister in November or on November 30th. Because I think it is even without any results, I think it should improve, enhance the confidence and the trust between you two, to exchange information, exchange to make your purposes clear to the other side
Sorry
of the
to interrupt you, but I just raised this question. We should dedicate another separate session to the Iran and Saudi Arabia deal. We just want to draw the attention back to the topic of this session, which is the role of the international actors on the Gaza crisis. I just raised these questions regarding the negotiation of ceasefire, the role of the Qataris, the role of the other countries in this regards. And I would like to ask about the China role and this crisis, because China has done a very good job regarding mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia last years. No matter of the progress of the deal, we should, as I told you, dedicate another session, full session to this topic. But some Egyptians, many maybe Jordanian, other countries who sees Saudi Arabia for a long time as a big brother and are in the middle of the negotiations of ceasefires by the head. It's my personal opinion regarding the Qataris in this regards. The exact question is that does China wants to play more effective, more intervention in this crisis, or just as we heard yesterday and the others from the other sessions, that China would doesn't like actually to play a major role in this regard. Please.
I don't agree. My personal point is that China has played a very constructive role in this regard. We used what we used is the UN platform. We proposed. We together with the other countries worked for many of the resolutions, and our ambassador's speech in the UN debate is very eloquent. Is wonderful. Okay. Hey, let me tell you what our president said about the Palestinian issue. Our president said the Palestine issue, actually for many years, we have consistently saying that the Palestine issue is the core of the Middle East agenda. That is to say, without the solution of the Palestine issue, the problem, the Middle East will not see stability. We are not see reasonable development. That is the Palestine question is the core of the Middle East agenda. Secondly, we would always like to say that the Palestine issue is one part of the efforts of China to build mutual political trust between China and the Muslim countries, the Islamic countries. Okay? Yeah, I think that Islamic countries support us in many issues, and we support Muslim countries' aspiration on Palestine issue. Okay, and our president also said very clearly that we are going to push forward more broader-based, more authoritative, more effective international conference on Palestine question. Okay, I think China is doing that. And secondly, China said that our president said he is more than willing to to bridge the gap among different Palestinian factions. This happens before October 7th, when President Xi Jinping met with Mohammed Abbas in May last year. Okay, currently, I think China we have some very busy domestic agendas in the last couple of months. I think after the two congressional sessions, which was ended a couple of days ago, and China will have more efforts in this regard. That is my point of view. And for the China's policy in the Middle East, we are actually having two priorities. For the first one, to support Palestinians' struggle for its legitimate cause. And secondly, we are also trying to contain the spillover, with the assistance of Iran, spillover of the conflicts in the region. And the region involves our economic growth, our markets. Okay, I will just stop here.
Okay, thank you. Because Mr. Crook wants to leave earlier, we may come back to you with the question.
I'm also leaving.
Okay.
Sorry.
Very constructive discussion, but unfortunately short time. Mr. Crook, I would like to give the floor once again, and maybe for the last time, to hear your last remarks. And I would like to raise the question of is there any end in short time of this war?
No one knows. I mean, there's no sort of simple answer to this. But I think, as I say, the reality that people have about conventional politics does change dramatically when you have an overwhelming majority of Israelis. When they did a poll recently about what you think about, do you approve of the military action in Gaza? This was a poll in Israel. 91%, I think it was, approved of it. But there was about 43% who expressed a reservation. And their reservation was that it wasn't going far enough, that it needed to be harsher on the Palestinians. Overall, 73, two-thirds of Israelis now, according to Israeli polls at the moment, want to see an attack on Hezbollah, immediate attack on Hezbollah, 73%. And that's now proposals for attack on Hezbollah are before the cabinet, lying before the cabinet. So it's quite hard to see this coming to an end by sort of the management processes of conventional politics, of, suggesting a two-state solution, that the Saudis are about to offer them sort of some recognition. I don't see that. I think there's a huge mood in Israel that is really bitter, angry, full of desire for revenge. And the rabbis are fueling it. Many of the rabbis, I mean, you can see them online. They're not always speaking in Hebrew, but they talk to the army in this way. And they say, listen, what's happening in Gaza, you have to kill the babies, the children, because they will become terrorists when they grow up. And you have to kill the women, because these women are going to produce more children who will become Hamas terrorists in due course. And senior famous rabbis are telling the Israeli troops this sort of message. So are you surprised what's happening in Gaza? Are you surprised that they won't go into Rafah and that we won't see a repetition? Are you surprised if it extends to Lebanon? Well, I won't be anyway. And I don't know how it'll come up, but I'm actually quite optimistic. It sounds strange, but the whole region is changing. In this period, we're going through a point of inflection. I think it's going to be ultimately a big change, important change that is taking place. And we see all of this, Russia and China, the BRICS being established, Iran are now a member of both BRICS and the SCO. And Russia's played a very important part if you like, by stabilizing Syria at that critical moment when it intervened after Qasem Soleimani went to Moscow and persuaded President Putin that it was so important to do it. So I think things are actually quite positive, but not in the sense of having an easy, comfortable solution, long-term or short-term, to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I think it's got to the stage of a trial of strength, and one side will be defeated, or the other. Thank you.
Many thanks. I would like to thank you again for accepting our invitation. It was, to me, very fruitful. Just would like to give the floor to my colleague Ali, which is behind every arrangement of this session. Ali, go ahead. We are running out of time, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now, yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I just wanted to raise my point to the topic, and we can follow up this by even email. As Dr. Jean mentioned, I think there is, we achieved actually to the hypothesis about keeping low profile, not only for China. It seems other global powers reaching to the point, as China says, Tao Guang, Yang Hui, keeping low profile. It seems China at its own changed its dimension based on different, for example, journals or reports, for example, Document 79 or the Delete America project, try to change its dimension. But really, and actually I wanted to raise a hypothesis and then ask the comments of our dear panelists about it seems to be witnessing the lack of acting role in this kind of crisis. Somebody mentioned it as a vacuum of power. We can discuss it more in our connection, but I wanted to express my deepest apologies due to the 90 minutes chance to travel. My personal schedule completely changed. I tried to do my best to benefit from our panelists, even at the airport, but thanks to Majid and GPTT, I can take advantage from this event. And from my side, I want to thanks to Dr. Motif, Dr. Jean, Alistair Crook, and His Excellency Ambassador Sultaniye for accepting our invitation and this interesting event. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ali. And I see in the participants Dr. Imamian and also Dr. Baghai is with us. If they want to raise any final remarks or comments, we can give the floor to them by raising hands. Yes, there is no any sign. I would like to give the floor again for the last time to I think that Dr. Matviv is not with us anymore. Doctor, can you hear me? No, he's not with us. Just for conclusion, I would like to give a floor to everyone for very short conclusion and remarks in just 1 minute. Please go ahead with Dr. Sultaniye, please.
I just want to thank and really congratulate the organizers. It was very educational, very interesting. There are points that I've taken note, and I think that that would be nice. Through your coordination, we can have further exchange or perhaps question back and forth to elaborate. And I think that there are issues that we have to concern about this dilemma. We are facing, anyway, a tragedy. It's worth to spend some time, intellectuals, impartial way, as we have noticed. Very eloquently they have analyzed. Of course, it is a bit somehow disappointing situation, but still I believe the think tanks and intellectuals can play a role, because at least I believe that many of us, we can have the viewpoints that there are some ears that they can listen to us. Decision makers should not make miscalculations again and again. That is why the Institute, when we have also events, sometimes 50 scholars and former practitioners are online, I expect and I request them just pass this message to decision makers. They have to listen to us, and I think that we can. And therefore, this kind of meetings as you arrange is very successful and very useful. Thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Good to have you. Mr. Krug here, final words, if you are still with us. No, unfortunately, not yet. Go ahead.
No, really, I'll leave it with what I said at the just now, and I'm very sorry, but I need to leave now, so I will shortly be cutting out. Thank you for the occasion, and thank you for everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all the best to you all. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Dr. Matviv, final words.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express my most sincere gratitude for the governance and policy think tank for organizing such interesting event. I think that one of the most important thing is multilateral character of such discussions. And sometimes it appears that you have your own paradigm, and you sometimes while conducting such events, such discussions, there's only one paradigm, and vice versa. For instance, yesterday I participated in one event with the foreign experts, and it was primarily Western point of view. And vice versa, when we in Russia, we conduct discussions that naturally, logically, Russian point of view prevails. But when we make different combinations and listen to each other, so sometimes it's very convenient and very fruitful to generate some ideas, very good ideas. And we're like experts still can play a role in generating even agendas for our states. And in my view, this is very important. Again, I would like to thank your esteemed governance and policy think tanks for organizing such event. Thanks.
Thank you for your participation. Actually, we at the International Department of the Governance and Policy think tank focus on this idea, the concept of the expert diplomacy. It's we believe that we should organize and orchestrate such a platform for exchanging different opinion and views. And as Dr. Sultaniye mentioned very precisely, that we are here to listen to each other, not just giving lectures, to come to such understanding that the outcomes can benefit the policymakers and the officials. And the last but not least, Mr. Liang Xiang, please, we are here to listen your final words.
Okay, thank you very much for taking me as a part of this discussion. It's also my greatest honor to be part of the discussion. I know the name of Dr. Sultaniye many years ago, but in the newspaper, it is the first time that I see you in the, but still digital. I hope that one day we can meet you in Tehran in person, and also our colleagues from Russia. Okay. I did learn a lot, though I have another appointment, but I try to stay till the last minute. But no problem, I can say sorry to the next appointment. Okay, so I will just stop here and stay in touch.
Just to say that was my honor, and I invite both of you and our good friend in Moscow to come to Vienna to our institute for our events. Next event, of course, we'll invite you. And I just want to say that we have had MOU signed 2 years ago with McGimo, in fact, in Moscow, and we are very closely working with the different institutes that we have involved. But anyway, it was a pleasure, and hope to see you also in our institute. Bye-bye.
Yes, we can wrap up the session and by saying that maybe very soon we will meet each other in person, whether in Moscow, in Beijing, in Vienna, also in Tehran. And we are eagerly following up these kind of discussion. And by thanking again every panelist, every participants, I would like to end this session and hope for everyone a very good day, week, year, and pray for the Palestinian and who are suffering from this act of crime and genocide. Okay, let's conclude the sessions. Goodbye and take care.